Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texas parents about what's going on in our schools. Today, I'm excited to be joined by two Texas parents who have taken the leap to start micro schools of their own right here in the heart of Texas. And the founder of KaiPod Learning, Amir Kumar. Amir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and for having Jordan and Sarah here with us.
Yeah, we're so excited to hear more about micro schools. You know, a couple years ago, micro schools, I'll let you explain what they are to our guests, but I vividly remember a couple of years ago when micro schools and learning pods really took off across the state of Texas, and we worked hard to protect the autonomy and the legal protections of those that are willing to start these great schools for our kids in Texas. So talk to our guests a little bit about what a micro school is and how you all are just doing incredible things here in the great state of Texas.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. And you are absolutely right. This movement really took off right at the beginning of the pandemic, where parents said, my school system isn't serving my child's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And the quality and the breadth of education I'm seeing isn't what my child deserves. They need more. So those parents took matters into their own hands. And we saw the rise of learning pods and micro schools all across the country, but especially in the great state of Texas. And so what we're now seeing is an evolution of that movement, where instead of parents alone starting these schools, we have teachers who are saying, I bet I can deliver a really high quality education for a small group of kids. And I have the entrepreneurial spirit to get a school off the ground in my community. And so in addition to being parents, Jordan and Sarah here, they're teachers, they're former educators who are just really excited about providing a new learning option for kids in their community. And micro schools are small, they're flexible, they're from the community, they're started by people within the community, and they just are just this brand new movement where kids can learn at their own pace. We can use technology to really drive innovation. We can take field trips. We can just do all these wonderful things that aren't possible in large schools. So I'm really excited to share more, specifically with the examples of these two here, right here in Texas.
Well, that is great. Thank you, Amir, for sharing what kind of precipitated this huge boom in the micro school space. And I am just thrilled to hear from two teachers and parents right here in Texas who have started their own using KaiPod Learning.
Yeah, so let's, Sarah, let's have you kick us off. So tell us about your school, your journey, what you were doing before, and what made you want to start your own micro school.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for including me in this conversation. So my school is very new. We opened this school year in August. So I'm located in Dripping Springs, Texas, and my program is called Apogee Dripping Springs, and we're a micro high school. So unlike a lot of people who start these types of programs, I am actually only focusing on high school, and Jordan is a camaraderie. He's my comrade in that. He's doing that also. And so that's one thing we have in common. So I got my start, like I said, this August, and I found KaiPod Learning when I was just doing a lot of searching on, what was happening in education, how were things changing? And my background is actually in Waldorf education. So Waldorf is like a niche, style of education learning, just like Montessori or anything else. It's very specific. It has a roots, a founder, all of that's over 100 years old. But what I recognized was that as the world has really changed, I feel like what kids need right now to be prepared for leaving home and being really capable and confident in their ability to be independent looks a lot different than what I even needed when I was younger. And so really when I started looking around at where my oldest daughters, I have two daughters, a current 6th grader and a current 9th grader, my oldest was in 8th grade, and I was trying to figure out where was I going to send her for high school, because the small program that she was in was a K through 8 Waldorf co-op. It actually started as a co-op through COVID, with a bunch of parents who just didn't want to do the masking and locking down and all of that. And then it just flourished after that. It just really took off. And as you know, as a Texan, a lot of people flocked to Texas specifically for freedom and to avoid mandates. So this co-op grew really fast, but it is still just K through 8. And I started looking around locally and having conversations with enrollment directors and heads of school, and I just didn't see a program that I thought was really going to check all those boxes of getting my daughter really, truly prepared for life. It feels like right now a lot of people are still using the benchmark of preparing students for college. And I just feel like the world is just a buffet of opportunity, and success doesn't look just like one thing, right? It can be many things. And so I just wanted to look at, how can I create an environment where my students can be prepared for living as really competent and confident people. And the main thing is that what I've told everybody is that, if you would have told me, so I graduated high school in 2000, 42. And if you'd have told me when I was in high school that the VCR and the home phone was going to be obsolete really soon, I would have thought you were crazy, because those were like hallmarks of my teenage years, and my childhood, really. The home phone was mounted in the kitchen. We would go to, Blockbuster on the weekends to pick out movies and do that kind of stuff, So what I'm getting at is that as parents, we can't, in our wildest imagination, truly come up with what technology-wise is going to be asking of our children in the future. But there are some foundational elements that never change, that they need to be able to budget, they need to be able to understand car maintenance, they need to have time management skills, project management skills, and they need to problem solve. They need to be able to think around things instead of just like waiting for someone to tell them what to do, right? To wait for the answer to show up packaged for them. So I'll stop talking there and let Jordan introduce himself.
Well, I don't know how to follow that up other than, yeah, this is it's an incredible opportunity. Thank you so much for opening this up to us. Yeah, as Amar mentioned here, we're this is now my 17th year in education or so, and I've done it all. I've done public, I've done private, I've done one-on-one education, things like that. And around about, let's see, oh gosh, Amar, tell me, when did you call me? That was January of 2020, like that. So I was contemplating the move out of Austin with my family, and around that time too, that I was like, you know what, I've done my job, I've done my time as a high school administrator, and I think it's just time to take the leap and just do something else. And the only thing for us to do at that point was just to start our own school. So I talked to my family about it, and that's where we moved down to New Braunfels and started Speria Academy, with the gentle prodding and reassurance and all of that stuff that comes from the people over at KaiPod, and Amar included over there. So yeah, I mean, my goal was really just to um, open up a place where the kids who are bored with the classroom, families who are just unable to really find the joy in learning again, the ones who are feeling left out in the cold, to come in and experience something that truly challenging for their intellect. A lot of project-based learning, a lot of big problems. I wrote curriculum for the school from the scratch and from the ground up, from scratch, mixing my metaphors. And that's where this idea came from. We're now 12 kids strong. We started off with 2 last year, 12 kids this year, and I think that's just emblematic of how it is that the people here in Texas and all over are thirsting for something that the public school system is no longer providing, and even some private schools too, right? There are some that mirror the public schools so well that they're indistinguishable. So yeah, I think it's time. It's time for Sarah over there in Dripping, and Amar up there in the great north, and then us down here in Texas to really kind of to cap things off. Yeah. Are there any other questions you got about this?
Yeah. So thank you, Sarah and Jordan, for kind of giving your background. I love to hear your passion. And quite frankly, hearing about coming from the public education sector, Jordan, I'm sure you said 17 years in the public school system. Is that correct? That is a lot. I would love to dive into, this is about the parent empowerment movement. All four of us are parents, and we're looking to make sure that, quite frankly, an antiquated system that is not serving every child is not only revamped to make sure that every child that chooses traditional public school is receiving a really high quality education, but also recognizing that parents who know and love their children the most, they really should be the ultimate decision maker and have the options, such as these excellent micro schools that you all are providing right here in the heart of Texas. So I would love to hear maybe where your mentality possibly was, because oftentimes I hear a lot of fear from within the public school sector of somehow this will harm public education to provide choices where kids that don't thrive and succeed in the traditional setting. But can you tell me about kind of your mental shift in your mental model from going from within a system that, quite frankly, it has kind of a protectionist mentality, right? To now I can do this. I'm a teacher. I can start a school myself and serve. I mean, my goodness, up to 12 students in just after a year is really, really incredible. Talk to me about that shift in your mentality and what you're seeing in the kids that have selected to participate in your school.
Well, I think a lot of times we get hung up to, and I love that you use that word protectionist. I think we get like hung up on what it is that our kids are going to need to get out. And Sarah, you touched on this too, that a lot of this is geared toward that college acceptance, and it's one thing whenever you are teaching it and you're in the thick of things, you're in the classroom, you're like, yeah, you have to know how to find a derivative. But do you really have to find a derivative? I mean, I look at all y'all's faces here, and even I who teach it, I'm like, why do I need this? So it started early on in my teaching career where I was like, there are just things here that, yeah, and I hate to say it, you're just going to have to learn these things because that's just the way it is. And it just like can need to become sour in the mouth every single time you say it. So to get out of that public school system and get out of that public school mindset really requires, I don't want it to sound like I'm bragging, but it requires someone who is capable of sloughing off all of that training and all of that curriculum and really focusing on the unique individual outcomes for each child. Seeing all of y'all shake your heads like you agree, right? That some of our kids are going to go off to college, and that's wonderful. And some of our kids are going to go to the workforce, and that's also wonderful. And why is it that we need to spend every minute of every day making sure that our kids get the same amount of information when they're not going to head off in the same direction? And so what happens then when you start looking at the individual child is now you can really reach in and reach that full potential that's there. We've got a kid who is and here we've got a kid who is he knows he's going to be a mechanic and he wants to drive trucks and stuff like that. So I'm looking at what kind of math is really required for him. He hates math, he absolutely hates it, but when you start talking in terms of him, you're like, all right, this is how you go from metric to standard, and here's how you measure the different types of bolts on the engines. Like he perks up. And that's math. That's great. And that's what he needs at that time. And he's not going to go through calculus, and he doesn't have to go through calculus. And this is where it becomes important for those parents as well to see that and see that the kid isn't just going to receive information and forget it later. Like that he is going to use that information for the rest of his life. And I think that's the type of parent also that wants to be here too. The ones who see that their kid is recognized and see that the kid has the potential that every one of us as parents know is there with our kids. And so for me, that shift was easy because you're going from this public school mentality where everyone has to get the same thing. You're delivering your lessons, you're teaching to 16 kids, and they're all doing the same thing. And you got those 8 over there who are just like in the shadows, and you got the 2 who are really excelling. And it's a juggle. It's a
Mhm.
juggle here too with the micro school.
Sure.
but it's a different type because now you're not thinking like, how do I differentiate the same thing? You're thinking, how do I really talk to that level and talk to
Yeah.
that kid? So,
Well,
um,
that's
yeah,
great. Thank you for sharing that mindset. When I talk to teachers like yourself that have been in the system, and many that have left for one reason or another, or have shifted to a different model, a lot of times there is kind of an awakening of we are creating this system and protecting it, as opposed to looking at the qualities and the skills and the goals and the wishes of each individual child, and really ensuring that they are getting a well-rounded education, high quality education to set them up to launch into the world, not specifically into college if you want to go to the four-year college. But we've all seen what's happened when this four-year college for all mentality has really, really sent a lot of kids down a path that they didn't want to go down, not only academically or for their professional lives and working lives, but also financially. We hear it all the time: cancel the debt, do this, because kids were steered from a system into another system with very little regard for what they wanted to do and what their skill sets were. So thank you for sharing that. Sarah, I'd love to hear what you're seeing from your students who have made a shift. Are many of them coming from within the public school system? Are most of them coming from a Waldorf school? Or what are the kids that have chosen to come to your micro school? What was the impetus for them seeking you out?
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of a mix. So I'm kind of, like I said, in my first year, first 8 weeks, and I started out with 3 students, and then at the end of our 6 week session, we take a break, and then we start a new theme, a new session, and we had 2 new students join us. So now I have 5. Which is great, because I had one person say, "You almost doubled your
Yeah,
your enrollment." And I'm
that's
like,
right.
"Well, you're right. Percentage wise, I went up a lot." One of those students, of course, is my daughter with a Waldorf background. But we actually have another student who just joined us. She's been K through 8 Waldorf also. And so it's been a good fit for her in the sense that there's a lot of creativity that's here for her to explore. The other students that I have 2 public school students, 2 juniors. Actually, they went K through 10 in public school and are just now taking the leap to try something different. And they're doing really well. And I think a lot of it for them is actually unlearning some things, and also seeing that they can relax here, that the pacing is different. I want to know them. I want to know what they're interested in. And they do get to explore their personal interests. So we do something called passion projects. So on top of the theme of things that I'm guiding them through and that we're learning together, they also have a passion project that they get to explore. And so, the topics that they have chosen are very interesting, and they're as varied as the individual students are. So, and then
Can
my,
you give us some examples? I would love
yeah,
to hear some examples of maybe what children had to unlearn, and then some examples of what their passion projects are.
sure. So definitely I would say the model of going rapidly and skimming the surface of lots of things. They have to unlearn that mentality also of just the regurgitation, right? So like the newest student who joined me, when she did a visit, we do visit weeks. And so she came for 3 days to visit us. And my students at that time were in like a Middle Ages theme. And so I said, okay, what are you most interested in? And we'd broken, like, if you're going to do a comparative analysis between one time period and another, what are the subject areas you'd look at? And so my kids had already broken it up into about 7 different topic areas. And so I had her just look at what we had already decided. And I said, I want you to number those from most interesting to least interesting, and then tell me what your number 1 is. So she did that, and her number 1 happened to be arts and culture. And it didn't actually overlap with any of the other areas that the other students had already picked to investigate. And so I said, okay, great. At the end of the 3 days that you're with us, I want you just to have spent so while everybody else is doing their project research time, I want you to use the tools that we have here in the class, which is a lot of books, but we also have the internet. And I want you to do just a 5-minute presentation on what you found about arts and culture. And what I found her doing was literally just copying straight from books. And I went over and I said, hey, you know what? I'd rather you just read and then tell me what you found interesting about what you read. And she couldn't do it. She read, but then she was just copying. So at the end, when she did her 5-minute presentation, they weren't her original words. It was the words that she copied from the book. And so that's just one aspect of getting them to think for themselves and to, this topic is interesting to you. So learn about it and then just tell me what you found interesting about it, right? Did you have anything that you learned that was new? Did you have something that surprised you? That kind of stuff. And so that's one unlearning that really has to happen. The other thing is that expectations, right? What does success look like in this new environment? And that's what they have to figure out also, because they figured out the success, what looks like in public school, right? A lot of it is obedience and, you are mimicking a lot of actions, right? So the teacher's like, okay, this is how you do this. Now you just repeat that, right, to them. And so they'd already figured out what success looked like. And some of them actually were struggling with that. A lot of the kids that have come to me or on my list of interest when I'm talking with the parents, it's really social things that are actually driving them out of the public school system more than anything. Because especially here in my community, the public school is over enrolled. And they've got, almost 4,000 kids in one high school. I think it was around 3,500, 3,700, something like that. And so these kids are getting lost. Some of these kids that need help or just, they aren't, they're just not, I guess I would say, like Jordan had mentioned, how many kids are kind of like with it. And then there's some completely lost and, whatever. And these are the kids that just need to be seen and they need to belong. And here that's happening for them.
Can I just say, I'm just having this huge moment of like, look at what's possible when an educator has 6 kids, 10 kids, not 150 kids coming across 6 different class periods.
Yep.
You get to know that this child wants to be a mechanic. You get to see that this child doesn't have confidence in the arts and culture and she needs to come up with her own words. That is the future. This is what will help students build the skills for the future. And if you're a parent, gosh, like you can't imagine a better place to your child to thrive than these 2 schools.
Yeah, that is exactly correct. And I hear this all the time when I'm traveling across the state talking to educators and parents of just recognizing the individual that is the student, right? And also you touched on something that's really important. I selected a classical school for my kids because this idea we have from a lot of people's perspective, we have moved away from incentivizing and growing a love for learning, but then also being able to think about, form, and articulate your own thoughts. And I think that is something that is really crucial for children that have access to your micro schools or other types of schools is shifting that mental model that we really need to focus on allowing children to form thoughts and to think on their own, to spot logical fallacies, to be able to function in a world, quite frankly, where information is constantly coming at them. I mean, between social media and then the 24-hour news cycle. So I love to hear that you all are really cultivating that love of learning, that pursuit of children's passions, and helping them learn to think, not just telling them what to think. So that is really amazing. So let's hear a little bit about, I want to talk about where kind of Kai learning, we talked where it came from, but where you hope to see it go. There's obviously massive growth, not just here in Texas, but you all are all across the country. Talk to our viewers about one, how do they find out more about KaiPod? And why would educators and parents want to look into maybe themselves jumping into the education space and starting their own micro schools? And what you see going on both here in Texas and across our great country?
Thank you. I think the macro point is the intention behind the public school system has always been good. It's educate all kids.
Yep.
But like all parents know, if you try to do it all, you do none of it well. Right? As a parent, I know I got to pick and choose my battles. And I think the same thing, the public school system can't solve everything for everyone.
Right.
And so what you start to see is these teachers across America, but especially in Texas, they have this incredible amount of entrepreneurial energy to say, I can do this better. And I have a passion around Waldorf or mechanics or project-based learning or athletics, pick your topic, or special education. I have a skill set and a passion around a particular topic. And I want to create a school for kids who would thrive in that environment. And so what KaiPod Learning does is we empower those educators. We want to find them and we want to encourage them to take that leap, as Jordan said. So we have an entire course, an entire platform to help them go from an idea in their head to a school with real kids. And we help them get that business off the ground, to start serving kids, to grow their school, and to have really great impact. And so our vision is thousands of schools across the country, thousands of schools that are started by passionate educators that are serving a small number of kids each. But over time, this becomes a large national movement. So if you're a teacher who's got some energy around this, go to kaipodlearning.com. If you're a parent who says, I don't see any options in my community that are going to serve my child well, you too, believe it or not, can start a school. We can help you do that. And so through this, we've grown our network across 25 states. We serve dozens and dozens of schools, and we continue to grow because we find amazing entrepreneurs like Jordan and Sarah who say, I want to do this.
Well, that is fantastic. Thank you for sharing how that more parents can get involved. The parent empowerment movement has swept Texas, and we are on the precipice of passing the nation's largest education savings account so that families can utilize the resources that we as a state have said every child deserves access to pursue their dreams, to launch, and to be great Texans. And so I'm grateful for you all kind of taking the leap and really being on the forefront of doing it yourselves without, quite frankly, those education savings accounts passed. But before we wrap up, I would love for you to talk to the parents of Texas. I would love for you to talk to the educators and the patriots of Texas that recognize that there is more, that there is better for our kids. Tell them why they should get involved in the parent empowerment movement and how that working together, we can ensure that every single child has access to learning pods, to micro schools, to private schools, to great public schools, public charter schools, whatever it is, whatever is best for each individual child. Why should parents here in Texas jump on the bandwagon and make sure that every child has access to whatever learning environment will best serve each child?
Yes. Well, I love to tell parents to be informed, just pay attention to what's going on and actually seek out data. To me, I'm a data person. I want to see the numbers. I want to know what's going on. And so I want to mention that in December of 2023, intelligent.com actually did a survey of 800 employers, and they were asking them for feedback on recent interviews that they had done with high school graduates or recent college graduates. And I just want to mention that of that 800, the employer said 53% of their interviewees struggled with eye contact and 19% brought a parent to their interview. Mm-hmm. So that alone tells us like we've got to do better, right? These kids are not equipped to be showing up in the world the way that they need to be responsible and independent people. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think it was Ed Power. I can get you these links and everything for your show notes, by the way. There was a survey of middle school and high school students, and I believe it was around 1,600 students, somewhere around 1,500, 1,600 students. And collectively, 60% of those students said that they found school, this was specifically to public school, they found school a waste of their time. And so when the students themselves are saying that this is, they can recognize that this is a waste of their time, we've got to make some change. And I do believe that the future of education is hyper local and it is small because that's how we make change. And to be honest, it's really kind of the root of education. When you look at how the one-room schoolhouse used to be, there for every little town, little community, there was one school and it only serviced that community. Nobody was getting bused anywhere. Nobody took, and drove their kids across 45 minutes across town to get to a better school or whatever, whatever that looked like. That wasn't happening. There's a really great book that came out called Building Thinking Classrooms. And it was by a gentleman who at the time was living in Canada. He was a PhD student. He spent, I think it was between 12 and 15 years on this research. And he went K through 12, sat in every classroom K through 12. And it was over the course of these years that he did all of his research. He spent at least a week in every classroom, sometimes longer. And the end result of his research was, he said, there is no thinking happening in classrooms. And what he meant by that, because he said, I know this is going to sound really awful, but he said, what I mean is that teachers are working really, really hard, and there's a lot of busy things happening in classrooms, but students aren't actually generating their own thoughts, and they're not thinking for themselves. And he initially focused just on math classrooms. That was actually what his focus was. And then eventually he pivoted out of that. And now he's written some books to focus on other learning environments so other teachers can take up his suggestions. So I encourage everybody to look at that book, Building Thinking Classrooms, or just look up the author and listen to some interviews by him. He's fascinating. And the other thing I wanted to mention was what you had talked about college education and the high cost of education now, and sort of us driving everyone to like one sort of endpoint of what we think success looks like. And Dave Ramsey did a really great documentary called Stolen Future. And it actually documents the changes that have happened in college education and the high rate that it is now costing people. And they highlight several people, like there's a dentist, I'll never forget, the dentist in the area is like crying. And he's saying, at this rate, I will literally never pay off this debt. And he's like, I'm trapped. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm just trapped. And he had a successful business. I mean, he'd opened his own practice, the whole thing. And yet here he is, a father, a businessman, and he's like weeping on camera to talk about how he's like never going to get out of this debt that he's in.
That's right. That's right. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey's as well. And I know exactly the interview that you're talking about. And it is heartbreaking when we see kind of what is going on in the path that society and systems have shoved kids. They're 18, 19 years old. They don't actually know what they're doing in terms of signing up for this massive hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars worth of debt if you're going particularly into medical. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing that with our viewers. Jordan, what would you like to say to the parents all across Texas about getting involved and fighting for each individual's child and access to the very best learning environment that will serve the child?
Well, yeah, I don't think there's any more valuable. I don't want to like sound like a warmonger or anything like that, but this is a battle, like we are fighting for the future of our kids. And so that's I think there's no battle more noble than that, right? If we can provide to our kids the best possible future, then why not try? And to Sarah's point, yeah, it's a local thing, and as I'm looking at college and our pasts, I was born in the '80s, and I think we're just kind of like just coming out now of this industrial mindset, and so the future for our kids isn't going to look like manufacturing. It's not going to look like assembly lines. It's not going to look like that. It's going to look like small collaborative units working together for on a project, or for some sort of company that's putting us on Mars. So I guess the message that I've got for the families out there is, number one, trust the process, right? That these micro schools are the best bet to get your kids most ready and capable for the future ahead. And then also, like, do your research on top of that too. Like Sarah and I and Amar and a lot of the other KaiPod Catalyst people have education backgrounds, and not just like a couple of years education backgrounds. It's saying I'm reconnecting. Hang on.
Correct.
But not just like, okay, cool, all right, still good. All right, not just like 2 or 3 years, but I'm rounding almost 2 decades of education, and so like that's something that I think is worth looking into as well, whether or not you're going to trust a teacher coming in just now into the public school system, or look into like how much experience these teachers in these micro schools have and the passion behind them. And I think that's not to say that our teachers in the public school system aren't passionate. They certainly are. But we've got the same thing, if not better, here in those micro schools, the people who are really wanting to do this for a living and help. So it's all about the kids. It always has been about the kids. And that mission's never going to change.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. Let's close it out with Amar telling us about what the parents in Texas need to do to empower each and every parent to have education savings accounts, to have access to the very best education possible, including wonderful micro schools that you can learn about at kaipodlearning.com.
Yeah.
Close us
I
out.
mean, this is such a moral issue for me and for a lot of other people. And the question is, which side of the issue are people going to be on? Are we protecting the local public schools, or are we enabling more choice? And the simple answer for me is, never in history has a monopoly been the right answer.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think this is going to be the right side of history on this, is not going to be about protecting a monopoly. The right side of history here is going to be enabling more choice, fighting for more choice. Because when we have choice, we have competition. When we have competition, all boats rise.
That's right.
The public schools should get better. The private schools should get better. Micro schools should get better. And so I think the concept of education savings accounts stimulates that choice. It creates more competition.
Yeah.
We've seen it in Arizona. We've seen it in West Virginia, in Florida, in Kansas, in Iowa, lots of the states around you. So I want that to come to Texas. I want there to be thousands of teachers who say, I'm going to create the choice for my community, and I'm going to show how I can do it better than someone else.
Yes.
And so all parents should want that for their community. Because then even if you're going to still go to your local public school, that public school is going to get better for your
That's
kid.
right. That's exactly right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the amazing work that you all are doing, for founding KaiPod Learning, for founding your micro schools and serving students so well in the heartland of Texas. Thank you to all the parents and viewers who have joined us. This is Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin, and now you have the power.